Now, we hear a lot about extremism, but it seems that my colleagues care more about pointing the finger in one direction. What is extreme is continuing to trust Iran and wrapping yourself around a president and administration continues to make bad deals with Iran in favor to maintaining power in a political election year. What is extreme is trusting Iran and the fact that oil and money is fungible. And so what we're required to do, yes, to be adults in the room, is open our eyes and see the way the world works. I've seen the way the world works. I fought in Iraq. I've seen the militias that were trained by Iran. I also just got back from Israel yesterday, and I've seen the heinous death that was caused by Hamas. So yes, we need to call out extremism. And before we use our fingers, we better use our thumbs. After Hamas' brutal October 7th massacre of over 1,200 innocent people in Israel, no one can deny or look away from Iran's role as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. The Middle East is on fire, with Iran's proxies attacking Israel and U.S. troops across the region. Iran's proxies have launched over 52 attacks on U.S. troops since October 7th. We have a responsibility to our troops in the Middle East to cut off every possible resource that might go to terrorists and thugs that are lobbing mortars and UAVs at them. This bill, the very well named and apt No Funds for Iranian Terrorism Act, imposes new sanctions on the $6 billion of Iranian funds transferred to Qatar as part of the 2023 hostage deal. First, let me say that I'm relieved that Americans held hostage by Iran are safely home. They've been through a terrible ordeal and should never have been imprisoned in the first place. But by cutting a $6 billion deal with the leading state sponsor of terrorism and one who has had a 44-year-long history of hostage-taking only incentivizes more hostage-taking and places a bounty on every American head globally of $1.25 billion. Iran is getting access to every angle of America, and we can't let them threaten our national security. 1,200 people were killed in the barbaric Hamas attacks on Israel, and about 241 hostages were taken as well. This is a moment of moral clarity. Money is fungible. Iran having access to these funds frees up money for their malign activities. Iran not only uses this money in regional conflicts, but they use it globally. They continue to supply deadly drones to Russia, supporting their unprovoked war of aggression in Ukraine. And those across the aisle and on our side who want to continue to support Ukraine's defense, self-defense, we're funding both sides of this war, and we must be more prudent. We know that Iran's going to keep funneling money into Hamas and other terror organizations, propping them up with Chinese, Russian, and North Korean weapons. Hamas, which beheaded babies, raped women, and burned people alive. The only acceptable response to this brutal terrorist assault is to impose new restrictions to this, that permanently prevent Iran from tapping into this money. We need to make it as hard as possible for Iran to give Hamas another red cent. Iran's long history of sanctioned evasion and money laundering means we cannot trust that Iran would use this money for humanitarian purposes. If we had any doubt about Iran's intentions, look no further than DOJ's 2019 indictment against a Turkish bank for its role in facilitating billions of dollars worth of fraudulent Iranian transactions made to look humanitarian, when in fact no such purchases actually took place. Don't take my word for it. Iran's president, Raisi, bragged to the world that Iran would spend the $6 billion wherever it needs it. It would be irresponsible for Congress and the American people to allow another penny to flow to Iran. That's why this bill ensures that the funds stay permanently off limits for the Iranian regime. This bill would impose immediate mandatory sanctions on any financial institution that helps Iran use the $6 billion, effectively freezing it. With such instability in the region, the last thing we need to give is Iran access to $6 billion to be diverted to terrorism. We must sanction anyone who enables the transfer or processing of transactions of these funds, plain and simple, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I'm going to end with the words of both John Kerry and John Kirby. At another bad deal that Joe Biden was in office for, Secretary John Kerry acknowledged to CNBC that money Iran received in sanctions relief would go to groups considered terrorists. When asked about whether some of the $150 billion in sanctions relief to Iran would go to terrorist groups, John Kerry reiterated that after settling debts, Iran would receive closer to $55 billion. He conceded some of that could go to groups considered terrorists, saying there was nothing the U.S. could do to prevent that. He said, and I quote, "I think that some of it will end up in the hands of the IRGC or other entities, some of which are labeled terrorists." He said in the interview in Davos, referring to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, "You know, to some degree, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every component that can be prevented." In August, Bloomberg wrote about how the administration is loosening sanctions so that the increase of oil supply would lower gas prices in America. And yes, because of a terribly named Inflation Reduction Act, prices have gone up because of overspending. But because of relaxing sanctions all over the world, the priority has been placed upon political power next year. And John Kirby even mentioned it, that when asked last month on October 11th, making sure we have a viable global market for oil, working hard to keep prices of gasoline down here. Yeah, the way to keep prices of oil down in America is through energy independence, not giving Iran more money. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield.